Thomas Hutchinson, who was the governor of Massachusetts. And in August of that year, the Sons of Liberty, after imbibing a little bit in some rum and whatever alcoholic beverages, there's actually, if you've ever read the account, this group starts on their way, and they come up and knock on one guy's door, and they said, we don't want you to sell stamps. He said, I'm not going to sell stamps. Would you guys like to adjourn to the tavern across the way? And, the drinks are on me. And they said, oh, that's a good idea. And they didn't touch his house. Okay? They went to another guy's house, and he wasn't home. Well, they broke into it, and after they destroyed the house, they went down into the cellar. And the expression was, and they struck the bung from every cask, and hilariously drank up its contents. And then went up King Street, and they came to Thomas Hutchinson's house. And what they destroyed in that house was the largest library in colonial America. It was 3 stories high. It had one of those where you had to have ladders to get up to the books. I forgot how many thousands of books were in that library. But they were seen as a collection that were owned by a guy that we detested because he was a representative of the British government, and we didn't like that. But if you went to colonial America, people like Hutchinson had libraries. Harvard College, Harvard University, is the oldest institution of higher education in the United States. It began when John Harvard gave his books to create the first library. Okay, 300 books. Harvard's library now ranks, I think, as the 3rd largest in the United States. The Library of Congress is the largest. Library of Congress gets about 10,000 items every day. Every day. Now, you know where the Library of Congress started? What's the basis for the Library of Congress? Was a private library of Thomas Jefferson's. Okay? I don't know if you know what the Library of Congress originally was for. It was for Congress. You can go to the Library of Congress. There are several million people a year go. You just can't take out the books unless your name is senator or congressman or something along those natures. Okay? But most libraries were for the rich and the well-born because, first of all, they can afford to buy books because books are expensive. And if you don't think books are expensive, anybody have a kid in college? Okay. Yeah. Unbelievable what books are. I still have some of the books from my first year as a history student, 1963, and paperbacks, 50 cents. 50 cents. Of course, Gutenberg had just died like the year before. So it was that long, but 50 cents. Now, last time I used the textbook, I think it was probably $100. So books were, so the rich had it. But people like Jefferson, people like Ben Franklin knew that if you're going to foster democracy, you have got to have the ability for people to know what's going on, to be able to read those things. If you've ever read Thomas Jefferson's Declaration of Independence, and most Americans don't, and you ought to read it. Just do nothing but read the first 3 paragraphs. It is a wonderful document. Okay? But you will look at it and say, boy, that sounds familiar. Yeah, because if you've ever read John Locke, it's the same ideas. In some cases, almost word for word. John Locke used to call for life, liberty, and property. Jefferson said, well, let's clean that up a little bit. We'll call it the pursuit of happiness. Okay? But Jefferson knew, Franklin knew, that you have to have an educated public. So who's responsible for one of the first circulating libraries in the United States? Benjamin Franklin. Who's responsible for the beginnings of the Library of Congress, Thomas Jefferson. Okay? The founding fathers knew that the sustaining of democracy requires an educated population. That's why when you have totalitarian governments, one of the things that government wants to do is to influence what is taught and how it's taught. I've done a lot of presentations for groups like Leadership Wheeling. It's usually in January. And there have been a couple times, and some of the folks that have invited me to come in and say, you know, Dave, you're a little negative about Wheeling. And I said, no, I'm not. Because the job of the historian is to tell you what has happened. Not what you wish had happened, or to look at it in just that way. Your job is to tell the truth as best as you can find it. What's the biblical phrase? Ye shall know the truth, and the truth shall set you free. Okay? Dealing with folks who are ignorant of what's going on is pretty easy. Oh, yeah, that's the way it is. Oh, is that really? No, you've got to understand that. You've got to be able to appreciate that. That's what libraries do. And that's why we're here tonight. That's why we've started this program. This is a way to talk about the history of a community outside of an academic environment. I mean, I've taught the history of Wheeling for 25 years. And during my tenure at West Liberty, it was the most popular history upper level. Okay? And one of the reasons is that, and I offered it at night, and if you'd ever been downtown on a Wednesday, that's one of the reasons this is on Wednesday, is Wednesdays was my night for Wheeling history. You would see this strange guy walking downtown, followed by, somebody looked at me and said, my God, I thought you were Moses. He said, with that white hair and that beard, and he said, you're leading them over the bridge. He said, that's what I said, well, I don't know if I'm going to lead them to the promised land or not. But what I will do is tell them about their community with all the warts, because that's what history is about. I mean, you can't talk about, let's say, the settlement of America without being very truthful about the treatment of native peoples. Or, now, maybe if you're the governor of Virginia, you can forget that slavery was involved with the Civil War, but it's central to the Civil War. And you can't just erase that. You've got to consider it. That's what a people's university is all about. I'd like to read you a little quote from Andrew Carnegie. He said, libraries foster the principle of self-help. The basis of every improvement, material, intellectual, or spiritual. Okay? The library becomes the true university, entitled to a first place for elevation of the masses of the people. As most of you, I think, are familiar, Carnegie gave away millions of dollars. What in today would be billions. Okay, and he listed 7 things that a rich man should give his money to. Number 7, by the way, was churches. Number 1 was universities. Carnegie Institute, okay? The fact that I am retired and having a very comfortable retirement is based on the fact that my retirement is provided by the